Hello, UCAR. Peter Christensen here, coming to you from the CEO's desk. Going to talk about, one that's been around for a long time, but it keeps coming up. It's the gift that keeps on giving, like the Jelly of the Month Club. So, what are we talking about here? We're talking about the buyer wanting to move a few things in early. Just let me move a few things early. What could go wrong? What's the big deal? So you know the story. Buyer under contract. The home stretch, but maybe their their storage unit has the month is up, but it's a week before settlement, and the property is practically vacant. So, can I just move some stuff in? The garage, usually, right? I'm just gonna move some stuff in the garage. So what's the big deal? Why is it an issue? Have you done it 100 times with sellers? Maybe. I don't know. Well, the reason when maybe you reach out and maybe on the hotline or you talk to an attorney and they say, not a good idea. Let's just walk through why. And first of all, you're protecting your sellers, right? Like, that's where we're going to go. It could go for buyers too, but let's say you're a listing agent. Why you might say this maybe isn't the best idea. Well, first of all, there's the question of they move the stuff in. There's always the question of how far are they really going to go. It's always just a few boxes or a piece of furniture that they don't have room for. And then it turns into the whole garage is full, which sometimes spills over into the house, which is not what you agreed upon. But now you've got an awkward situation where they're going beyond the scope of the permission they were given. And who has to deal with that, right? The listing agent, the seller, the buyer's agent. And it's a little awkward. Keep in mind, too, you've got a dynamic here where you're trying to keep a good relationship between the parties, the buyer and seller, because they're in the middle of a transaction, maybe on the home stretch, but you don't know if there are still going to be a few hiccups to work out. And you want them to have a good relationship and maintain a good relationship. And what you're doing is you're introducing an element where things can go wrong. So number one is, what if they exceed the scope? We said we're just moving in a couch, and then pretty soon it's 8 boxes of records, a couch, a bureau, a cabinet, and maybe they're saying, let's just move it in. We know exactly where this is going to go, and it's empty. The living room's empty, so they're moving stuff into the house. Well, that might create some friction there, right? And the seller may not be okay with it. So that's one reason. Number two is what happens if the transaction goes south? It could still blow up. There's still things that could go wrong. And now you've got a seller who has a home full of somebody else's stuff, and they're probably going to want to get it back onto the market and get it going as quickly as possible. But now they got a bunch of stuff from another party there. And so they politely ask that it be quickly removed, but what leverage do you have at that point? Probably not a lot to say, hey, buyer, come, go rent a storage unit and get the stuff out. I know the transaction just blew up because we couldn't see eye to eye on whatever, and now you got probably an unmotivated buyer that you're trying to coax to come get the stuff. What do you do if they don't? Well, then you got to start looking into the law. And how long what is your situation here? Is it a bailment situation where you're kind of a safeguard to that property, where you have some duties to the other party? Can you just junk it? Can you just get rid of it? Do you have to treat it like a tenant's property? I mean, it gets a little more complicated than simply come get your stuff. I put it out on the driveway. If you don't get rid of it, we're selling it to the neighbors. You might not have the right to do all that, and it could get complicated. So there's that issue. But then there's also what happens if The garage floods. What happens if the seller's over there, or an inspector that the buyer hired, and they leave the garage open and stuff gets stolen? Who's responsible? Well, the seller's the owner of the property, but it's not their stuff. Did you sign a waiver saying, seller won't be responsible? Will indemnify the buyer will indemnify the seller? Probably not. And so now you have a big question of who has to deal with that. Maybe the buyer presses the seller to make a claim on their insurance, which is going to make their insurance go up. There are a lot of issues there. What if stuff gets stolen? What if there's damage? What if it's a contractor the seller hired to complete repairs the buyer asked for, but they leave the garage open, or something goes missing and they suspect they're accusing that contractor of doing it? And, there's a lot more that can go wrong than you think. And so that's why when you talk to attorneys, they usually say, no, maybe offer to pay for another month of the storage unit. You're better off not moving it in because of all these issues we've brought up. It's just more complicated. Now, everything goes off without a hitch. Maybe there's never a problem, and you've probably done it before and not had an issue. But the reason attorneys usually say, don't do it, is because we look at what could go wrong. And if it does, what complications does it create? And so even though maybe it's a 15% chance something goes wrong, that's what attorneys do, is try to tell you, like, hey, we're going to try to protect you from anything going wrong. So as a listing agent, I would probably counsel my seller along the same line, right, of, guys, here are things that could go. I know you're not thinking this. Everybody's happy right now. It sounds like such a small favor, and maybe it's not a big deal, but I want you to know there are things that can go wrong, and I don't want you to be blindsided by them. If they do, I want you to understand what risk you're taking. Even if it's a small percentage chance anything happens, I want you to know what risks you're taking, and that is, there are issues of ensuring that the property, of safeguarding that property, of what happens, who caused the damage, what went wrong, what if they exceed the scope, what if the transaction fails, how do we ensure a good resolution to this? Those are all things that you don't think about just hoping everything goes perfectly. Remember, this is not legal advice. This is legal information only. If you need specific legal advice, please contact your attorney. Thanks for tuning in.